Well, Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm sure it will surprise nobody in this chamber today that I'll be speaking against the general principle of the prohibition of greyhound racing. Let me begin by saying this. This debate is not about whether members of this chamber care about animal welfare. Of course, we all do, and I own a dog myself. The real question is whether this bill represents good law, whether it's grounded in evidence, and whether it has been developed through a process worthy of this Senate. On each of those tests, it fails massively short. The concerns raised are not speculative, they are not partisan, they come directly from our own scrutiny committees, the Culture Committee and the Legislation, Justice and Constitution Committee. Both cross-party bodies have been remarkably consistent in their criticism of how this bill has been brought forward. The Culture Committee was clear that the accelerated timetable, driven by the 2025-26 budget agreement with the Liberal Democrats, has compromised the quality of the legislative development of this bill. It explicitly warned that the importance of questions remained unresolved, that members lack sufficient information to assess the impact of this bill at stage one, and the meaningful consultation that has simply not taken place. The Legislation, Justice and Constitution Committee went further, raising fundamental concerns about whether this bill actually sits within legislative competence of the Senate, its evidence base, and the absence key of an impact assessment. That committee exists to safeguard the quality, clarity and constitutional integrity of our lawmaking here in Wales. When it raises red flags, we should all pay attention and take their concerns extremely seriously. I would gently suggest that no one in this chamber should be more alarmed at the state of this legislation than the Deputy First Minister himself, given that he previously chaired the Legislation, Justice and Constitution Committee, having once been responsible for holding others to account on legislative standards. I can imagine he had been looking at this bill and thinking, I would have been quite robust with myself on this one. Perhaps the first thing that he would have seen as the former chair of the committee is his time of marking his own homework. And I would say this tongue-in-cheek to the Deputy First Minister. From the comments from his former committee colleagues, I would not suggest that his legislation would get a glowing report. Deputy Presiding Officer, the procedural failings here are serious. There was no white paper, there was no draft bill, there was no published impact assessment prior to introduction, stakeholders were not properly consulted before decisions had effectively already been made, for legislation that proposed a total prohibition on lawful regulated activity that is simply not good enough, and the Deputy First Minister should have known better. This lack of due process risks undermining the public confidence in our work here in this chamber. It also places members in an impossible position, being asked to endorse the general principle of a bill without the evidence needed to properly scrutinise it and implement law on contradicted data and anecdotal claims from those who want a ban, and most of those turned out to be lies. The committee have also been clear about the absence of a comprehensive and social impact assessment. The Culture Committee has explicitly recommended that such an assessment should be carried out before the bill progresses further. This is not a minor detail, and it is central to understanding the consequences of what is being proposed. I am glad that you've accepted this recommendation, but it is a shame it wasn't brought forward in the first place. We're also talking about jobs, about businesses and communities, many of them in areas where employment is not readily available. Yet we're being asked to legislate first and assess the damage later. That turns the entire legislative process on its head. There is also a glaring contradiction in the bill's stated purpose. We are told about animal welfare, yet there is no convincing evidence that has been produced to demonstrate that a blanket ban will improve welfare outcomes. On the contrary, licensed greyhound racing currently operates within a regulated framework with oversight and inspection, accountability, and a vet on the track. If the Welsh Government had genuine concerns about animal welfare, one would have expected that a serious review of that regulation enforcement to be a starting point. That option appears to have been dismissed without proper exploration in favour of the most extreme measures available, a complete ban. Our committees have done their job. They have scrutinised, questioned and warned. As members of this Senate, it is now our responsibility to listen to them. And I'm not giving away, I'm almost out of time, Lee. I have listened, and I'll encourage other Senate members to do the same. When I visited the Valley Tract not that long ago, one person who was there asked me to read this out, and I will do. It seems to me that many of the politicians in Cardiff Bay do not care about me, my life or my job. I love my Greyhound. He sleeps on my bed every night, and I love him dearly. It seems that those politicians in Cardiff Bay have lost track with reality. They've lost track with working people who represent my community. Shame on them, and shame on anybody with this ban. And May cannot come soon enough, as you've all lost all grip on reality. For those reasons, Deputy Presiding Officer, I cannot support the general principle of this bill, and I suggest that all members reject it for the sake of our parliamentary integrity.